Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
So glad you're with us today for the Thursday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. Hope you enjoyed our visit with Michelle Tafoya on the Wednesday podcast. If you haven't had a chance to hear that yet, we strongly recommend that. But today it's back to our usual fare, as it almost always is here on the Three Martini Lunch. But today it's three crazy martinis. So buckle up for that and get ready. So, Jim, we have talked about a few high-profile Senate races over the past several months. The big ones, of course, are the ones in the battleground states, Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania, Ohio, Montana, Nevada, Arizona. Well, it should have been Arizona, but not really. One that we don't talk about a lot is Missouri because Josh Hawley's got a pretty big lead. According to Real Clear Politics, the latest poll from The Hill and Emerson has Hawley up 11 over the Democratic nominee, Lucas Kunce. So Hawley's probably going to win. It's not expected to be a competitive state at the presidential level either. Nonetheless, Kunce is trying to defeat Josh Hawley, as you would imagine, and he's holding different events out there. And this has gotten a lot of attention over the last couple of days because they had a gun event. You might remember Tim Walz had the pheasant hunting event, which didn't go very well as he had the rifle stuck between his knees trying to reload his shotgun. But got even worse at the Lucas Kunce gun event in Missouri. First of all, he had Adam Kinzinger out there with him because Kinzinger and Liz Cheney are going full Dem here in this campaign. But here's the way Fox News reports it. Social media erupted on Tuesday in response to a Democratic Senate candidate firing an AR-15 at a gun range that resulted in a local reporter being struck by a bullet fragment. Quote, great day at the range today with my friend at Adam Kinzinger, Democratic Senate candidate Lucas Kunce posted on X. Quote, we got to hang out with some union members while exercising our freedom. Always have your first aid kit handy. Shrapnel can always fly when you hit a target like today, and you've got to be ready to go. We had 4 first aid kits, so we were able to take care of the situation, and I'm glad Ryan is okay and was able to continue reporting. Yes, that's right. KSHB TV's Ryan Gamboa was hit after a bullet fragment struck his arm. And Kunce, a Marine Corps veteran who was shooting an AR-15 at the time, wrapped his wound with gauze, according to the Kansas City Star. And so what was happening here is they were shooting these weapons at relatively close range, shooting at coffee cans and other things, metal targets. And so things can fly in various directions. And so the people who know stuff about guns all over Twitter yesterday talking about how ridiculous this was and how high the odds were that something like this could have happened. Thankfully, the reporter was hit in the arm and not somewhere more sensitive to the extension of his life. But Jim, these we're real guys, and we're having these events. Don't seem to be panning out too well for the Democrats this year.
No, you pointed out Kinzinger was there with them, and Liz Cheney has endorsed a lot of Democrats. Right after this event, Dick Cheney endorsed him and said, that's my kind of Democrat. Look, a lot of people talk about tort reform, but only I have shot a lawyer in the face. So I'm a little bit surprised when you think about it. It's easy to forget Hawley was running for re-election this year, considering how hated he is among Democrats, how much they believe that he was a de facto cheerleader on January 6th, stuff like that. Look, in a cycle where Democrats have talked themselves into believing that they have a shot in Texas, which, by the way, they don't. That's what today's Morning Jolt is all about. They believe they have a shot in Florida, which they don't. They believe they have a shot in Nebraska, where an independent, wink, wink, who likes Bernie Sanders, is running against Deb Fischer. And nobody's talked up the guy running against Josh Hawley. Really? That's when you know you're really a long shot. We're not even, the most, true believers the Democratic Party can get into it. Thankfully, this was not very serious injury. If I've not been shooting a lot of times in my life, but I have gone to the range. I have had hot brass when the shell casing comes out and it's hot. Comes into your shirt. That's a really bad, painful experience. I don't recommend it. Look, you're handling firearms. There is always a certain amount of risk entailed with that. People who know guns a lot better than I did said, boy, if you're firing an AR-15 at a target that close, the odds of a ricochet are worse. So I've heard some people have, serious skepticism about the sufficient safety precautions taken there. But I think what the most important thing that comes out of this is look, if a Republican Senate candidate had been holding a campaign event, firing an AR-15, and accidentally shot a reporter, how would it be? First of all, it would be big news. It would be covered from coast to coast, even if this Republican had zero shot of winning the election, because it would feed into this narrative that the mainstream media loves, that Republicans are all Yosemite Sam. Never mind the fact that Elmer Fudd is running on the Democratic ticket. They would, they're every Republican rootin', tootin', shooting, firing everywhere. They're dangerous. They're reckless. They're obsessed with guns. You can't, but when it happens to a Democrat, it's just a bad thing that happened. There's no narrative. There's no broader implications. There's no life. It's just bad random chance. And it probably was that, but it would have been the same otherwise. And I think by the way, somebody else pointed out, if that scenario I described, a Republican Senate candidate had accidentally shot a reporter with an AR-15, the word accidentally would not be in the headline. It would just be, Republican Senate candidate shoots reporter with AR-15. So again, am I screaming mad about it? No, but I just think it's very revealing. It's also very revealing about the state of Missouri that even the Democratic candidate feels the need to hold a campaign event with an AR-15.
True. He's a Marine, so he actually should be pretty proficient with a firearm. But yes, the fact that it actually was the candidate who fired the shot that led to the shrapnel that hit the reporter is quite something. And you're right. If it had been a Republican, the shooting would have been the headline. Now the headline, even in the Fox News version, is, wow, he was really quick with the first aid kit.
Yeah, which was good, but
Yes, that's good that they were.
That's a case of solving a problem you created yourself, right?
Yes. So it's good to be proficient in first aid, but it's even better to not shoot someone in the first place. So, the more you know. But also, you mentioned Nebraska, which is tighter than it should be. There's this candidate, Dan Osborne, the independent. I think what Deb Fischer needs to do there is cut an ad with Tom Osborne, the old Nebraska football coach who used to be in Congress, and say, this is Tom Osborne. This is not the other candidate in this race.
Yes.
And I assume that Tom Osborne supports Deb Fischer. That would certainly help in the ad and make it clear that all Osbornes are not created equal.
One other final note on that Senate race. So first of all, there has not been an independent poll of the state of Nebraska in the entire election cycle. Every bit of polling we get has come from the two campaigns. One is from, unsurprisingly, every Osborne poll shows that he's ahead by 6 points. And the Fisher polls show her ahead by 7 points, right? So, you don't have any, nonpartisan thing. The closest we've come is that the New York Times did a poll of Nebraska's 2nd congressional district. Remember, Nebraska is one of those states that allocated by congressional district. In the past, Democrats have won that one seat, around Omaha. There's a good chance Harris is going to do it again. Nate Cohn of the New York Times says, based on what they saw in that 2nd congressional district, Osborne is not ahead statewide. That's just kind of extrapolated. The idea that he'd have to be ahead by a larger margin than he was in that particular congressional district. But we don't commission. We do interviews on this podcast. We don't commission polls. But I'm just begging somebody out there, somebody not with one of these campaigns, just go out and survey the state, just so I have one more. My suspicion is that Fisher's going to win. And she's going to win by a tighter margin than usual. I honestly, I think you're right that the Osborne name confusion is probably a factor in it, and or the fact that he's a complete unknown, so he's a bit of a blank slate people can project. Also that he's an independent, wink, wink, even though he just doesn't know who he's going to caucus with if he's elected. Could be anybody. Yeah, sure.
It's always interesting with the polling. I've only been polled once in my life. I think I was a teenager. This was back in Michigan, and it was clearly a Democratic-run poll because the question was, I think, are you going to vote for Michael Dukakis or his Republican opponent? And so they did that all the way down the ballot. They never named the Republican all the way down, Senate, House, all this other stuff. And I'm like, it's almost like there's a result you're trying to get here instead of actually trying to see what the actual mood of the electorate is. But I'm sure that happens still today.
Yeah, this is back when you were in Michigan, right?
Yes.
Doris, did you feel pushed by that poll?
I felt that they had an answer, obviously, that they wanted. I wasn't going to give it to them. But speaking of Doris, I do have a Doris update later on in our conversation today. Okay. And let's just say the Democrats, again, not happy with Doris. But in the meantime, if you are looking at difficult polls or your candidate happened to shoot someone today, I can understand why you'd be a little bit stressed and why you'd pour a drink. But before you do that, have Z-Biotics, because if you take Z-Biotics before you drink, you'll feel better the next morning.
Z-Biotics pre-alcohol probiotic drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. And it's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next morning. Z-Biotics pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make Z-Biotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, as I'm sure you'll always do, and you'll feel your best the following morning.
Yeah, my colleague at Radio America knew his limits, got older. The limits weren't working anymore, so he tried Z-Biotics, and those limits were right back where they should be. Felt great the next day. Go to zbiotics.com/3ml to get 15% off your first order when you use 3ml at checkout. Z-Biotics is backed with 100% money-back guarantees, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Visit zbiotics.com/3ml and use the code 3ml at checkout for 15% off. Thank you, Z-Biotics, for sponsoring this episode and our good times. All right, Jim, on to our second crazy martini now. And Kamala Harris, for 2 days, was pretty much off the campaign trail. She did make 3 public appearances, but not at a rally or traveling anywhere. She had just barnstormed the other day with Liz Cheney in some of the battleground states. But she took the day off to prepare for an interview with Hawley Jackson of NBC. Then she took a day off to prepare for the CNN town hall that CNN had hoped would be a debate, and Harris. And in the meantime, she made a 3-minute statement calling Donald Trump a fascist, of course, yesterday. But in the NBC interview, credit to Hawley Jackson here, bringing up the issue that Bret Baier tried to bring up and Harris tried to dodge in their conversation about when she noticed problems with Joe Biden's cognitive functioning, of course. And the response from Harris was largely the same, but Jackson kept pushing in a way that made Harris really look ridiculous here.
Can you say that you were honest with the American people about what you saw in those moments with President Biden as you were with him again and again, repeatedly in that time?
Of course. Joe Biden is an extremely accomplished, experienced, and capable in every way that anyone would want if they're president.
And you never saw anything like what happened at the debate night behind closed doors with him?
It was a bad debate. People have bad debates. He is absolutely...
But that's the reason why you're here, and he's not running for the top of the ticket.
Well, you'd have to ask him if that's the only reason why.
What do you think?
I am running for president of the United States. I speak with not only sincerity, but with a real firsthand account of watching him do this work. I have no reluctance in saying that. No, of course I don't.
Okay, 2 thoughts here. We don't even need closed doors. We've seen him in public a million times, drifting off, forgetting the names of his cabinet members, including his Secretary of Defense, and just mumbling incoherently. And secondly, Jim, I just love her. What? That was a factor in him leaving the race? I'm flabbergasted.
Greg, I'm going to assume that you always do everything Mrs. Columbus asked you to do. But let's just say that every now and then, Mrs. Garrity will ask me to do something, and I'll say, sure, honey, I'll do it. And then I don't do it. Or at least I figure that the deadline for doing it, I did not hear the silent now when the request was made. And so, Jim, did you do that? Yeah. You notice how high the voice gets when you are suddenly caught with something, you're uncomfortable with the topic, you're hiding something that you don't want to say. Yeah, I did that. I just did that. It's going to be great. Yeah. So I heard a rumor that I cannot verify. And so I share this with listeners take all appropriate grains of salt. I don't have the sources within the White House or within the Harris campaign or anywhere else to verify this account. But I do feel like it starts to line up when you see moments like the one we just saw. The argument was that Biden did not want to leave the presidency, unsurprisingly, and that the strong arming going on by Nancy Pelosi and others, that there was effectively a deal, and that part of the deal of Harris being the nominee is that she would not criticize any part of Joe Biden's record. And that if she did so, that effectively, and we've already seen Biden make several comments, like the praise of Ron DeSantis, that seemed like shots across the bow, that I don't have to be as cooperative about this as I will not go quietly into that good night. And so when she gets asked this and refuses to acknowledge anything about Biden getting older or looking like he did on the debate stage, it feels a little more plausible. And by the way, when people, Democrats are just tearing their hair out because in their minds, they've had Walz was a great pick. He wasn't. They had a great convention. I actually think they did. They had a great debate. I think she actually did a good job. And yet the swing states are tied. In fact, you look at the national polls, like the one from the Wall Street Journal out this morning, she's actually losing the national lead. And they're like, Donald Trump is talking about Arnold Palmer's zucchini. Why are we losing to this guy? How is this possibly happening? And the answer is that that remaining sliver of the electorate, anywhere from 5%, 8%, some small sliver, they look at Harris and they don't believe her. They don't trust her. They don't think that when she doesn't get specific about what she wants to do and she can't think of anything she wants to do differently than Biden, they basically are like, okay, you're going to give us all the policies we don't like with a different face. When she says with real sincerity that she's never seen anything that Biden always seemed competent. Biden always seemed on top of things. And it was just a bad debate. Look, she says people have bad debates. Well, then why did he quit? Why, if it's no big deal that he had this bad debate and age is not a factor and he's perfectly capable of doing this job until January 20th, 2029, then why did he quit? We all saw it up on stage. He's a geriatric old man. She can't acknowledge this. And she will insist with, quote, real sincerity, unquote, that she never saw anything that made people doubt his abilities. That's people are like, okay, you're lying to me. You're lying to me and you're insisting that you're being really sincere with me. Therefore, I don't trust anything else you said. And that's why she's tied with a guy who keeps talking about Arnold Palmer and not the iced tea and lemonade drink. She's
in a no-win situation here because, like you said, she's not allowed to criticize him, or she doesn't think it's wise to criticize him. Yet at the same time, everybody knows that Biden is diminished. It's been in every poll even before the debate, lopsided margins that people don't think he's up for another 4 years. And so she's either got to stiff arm her own boss or she has to, lie, basically. So it's just she's in a no-win situation, but you'd think she'd have a better way to phrase it than that, because that was not at all believable. But we shouldn't really expect anything else from her. Today's 3 Martini Lunch is sponsored by BetterHelp. And if you're cringing watching Kamala Harris answer questions, and you're going to hear it again in the third martini, that just remember that mental health care is available, especially if you feel like you need help beyond the conversation with trusted friends and family members. October is the season of masks and costumes, but it really shouldn't be that way in your everyday life, whether we're talking about work or family issues or other issues. BetterHelp is there to help. All therapists are licensed, accredited professionals, and BetterHelp allows you to connect with them in a safe and convenient online environment. It's also affordable. You just pay a low flat fee for both live sessions as well as messaging with your therapist. And it's convenient. Do it at your own time and at your own pace. Communicate with your therapist as often as you want and whenever you feel that it is needed. So take the mask off with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/3ML today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/3ML. All right, Jim, on to our final crazy martini now. And Kamala, as mentioned, did a CNN town hall. CNN wanted it to be the debate. Trump didn't want to do another debate, so it's a town hall with Kamala Harris. And another opportunity for her to call Trump an authoritarian and a fascist and all that stuff that had been percolating earlier in the day. And there were also questions from the audience, which were supposedly undecided voters. And so here's one of the questions from the audience, Jim. It's one of those interview questions. What do you think is your biggest weakness? And, the famous answer is, well, I just care too much. I care so much. And Kamala comes really close to that in this answer.
What weaknesses do you bring to the table, and how do you plan to overcome them while you're in office?
That's a great question, Joe. Well, I am certainly not perfect, so let's start there. And I think that perhaps a weakness, some would say, but I actually think it's a strength, is I really do value having a team of very smart people around me who bring to my decision-making process different perspectives. My team will tell you I am constantly saying, let's kick the tire on that. Let's kick the tires on it.
Big weakness there. Wants to be surrounded by smarter people. Based on other previous reports, apparently they're not allowed to look her in the eye. But nonetheless, Jim, what do you make of Kamala's interview moment there?
Well, first of all, I value having very smart people around me who leave within 6 months because they can't stand me. You'll recall phenomenally high levels of turnover back in her presidential campaign, in the vice president's office. She likes to kick the tires, or the staffers, one or the other, in terms of that. Look, I recognize that this is, it's a job interview question. It's kind of a trap question. It's trying to get you to argue against yourself to be hired for the position. And we've all heard, insufferable variations. My problem is I care too much, or something like that. And there are two good first of all, there's the answer I'm going to give you the answer I wish she had given, and then two good answers when that comes up in listeners' job interviews in the future. The answer she should have given is that I believe the decision to withdraw our troops from Afghanistan was the right one. We had committed everything we could to that country in terms of blood and treasure, but I wish we could have done it some way that didn't end up in the casualties that they had. And I think that would be, people would give her credit for that. I don't think there's a reasonable argument to say, oh, no, we did that as the very best we possibly could. And you don't have to call out specifics, and you don't have to call out Biden. You just have to express regret for the way it shook out. And I think people would, look better upon Harris for being honest about that instead of handling this line of BS that, oh, my biggest weakness, I like to have smart staffers around me. Really? That's your,
I prefer the dumb ones.
Yeah, so a college professor once told me that the best answer to that question is to say, well, if I have 2 days on a deadline, I like to spend the entire 2 days on that. I am meticulous. I don't like to rush things. I very rarely will turn things in well ahead of the deadline. So if you have a deadline, give me the actual deadline. Don't give me don't expect me to turn it in early. And so some people might find that slow, plodding, or methodical, but I like to take that's a pretty decent, and that seems honest, even though you're just saying, no, I'm really detail oriented and I don't, rush things. Like if somebody ever said, Jim, what's your greatest weakness? And I'd be like, how much time you got? And I could show you, with the camera, the giant piles of crap on my desk. Obama gave a version of this that how many times have I, in the course of taping this podcast, have I mentioned to you, hey, did I tell you I'm going next Tuesday to Botswana? They're having a civil war. And my buddy said, hey, let's go there. And so I'll be there for 4 weeks. So you're going to need a guest host and all that stuff. And you'll be like, did this just come up? Like, oh, no, we've been talking about this for months. I didn't mention it to you? Yeah. So organization is not my great skill. But you can say, this is why I have a staff to help keep track of these things for me. That I think is an honest answer, one people probably relate to, and that if you've demonstrated enough skills in other aspects of doing the job, people probably won't think that badly of you. Again, first of all, but it was a good question. I suspect that, if Trump would probably never admit to any weakness. I think but every once in a while he will joke. He once said something like, I don't drink. If I did drink, could you imagine what I'd be like? And there was kind of this funny self-effacing acknowledgement that Trump does a lot of crazy things that most ordinary people would not do. And so I think there's room to answer that question in a way that can be kind of self-effacing and charming and self-aware. But I think the idea that her answer, which was, look, I'm surrounded by too many smart people and we just make too many good decisions. I think even the job interviewer would just roll their eyes and say, okay, moving on,
Yes, no, that's exactly right. Clearly, our biggest weakness is our inability to quit the Jets and the Bears, respectively.
Oh, yeah. Loyalty to lost causes. Yeah.
Yes. Loyalty is a good thing, but futility, not necessarily. Okay, I promised you a Doris update. First of all, the Harris campaign hit Doris with fundraising requests before, during, and after the town hall, and again this morning in flashing back to the town hall. But if they watched the town hall, I'm not sure they're going to expect much from Doris. But my favorite one, this came yesterday morning. And the subject line goes to all caps, Jim, at least at one point. And so, they're not happy with Doris. So the subject headline is, Doris, is there anything we can say? And so they go through all their talking points. And can you at least give us $10? So no, Doris is not about to budge. So, but they're yelling at her now. They're yelling.
Yeah. I'm getting real Gary Oldman vibes. Everyone! So one last kind of observation of that. If they really did send it touting the town hall before, after, and also she had spent not 2 days completely off the trail, but a significant amount of time, preparing for this town hall. They really, the Harris campaign really seemed to think that this was going to be a big deal. I watched it because I was writing something for the Post that will go up. Maybe it's up by the time people listen to this. But I don't usually spend my primetime hours watching political stuff unless it's a debate or something or election night. And it was it was not a great night for her. It wasn't bad. I don't think we're going to be talking. We talked about a couple of answers there, but I don't think there's anything that's going to cost her the race. But it feels kind of interesting. Here we are. It's October 24th. Last night was the 23rd. The Harris campaign really wanted that to be a big deal. And I wonder if they expected to have another debate. They expected to a couple million people have voted already. The election process has begun for lots of reasons. It seems like they're not seeing what they wanted to see. And they're trying to generate some big event, some October surprise, something that's going to shake up the race, which I think to me says they don't like the trajectory that they're on.
Yeah, that's probably right. And we talked about it earlier in the week where there people, at least off the record, were suggesting that the blue wall had some cracks in it. We'll find out soon enough if that's the case, but definitely tighter than they wanted because it's tighter than it has been in the previous two cycles, one in which Trump found a way to win and one in which he came very, very close. So it's understandable why they're nervous. But anyway, Jim, have a great day. We'll do it again tomorrow.
Looking forward to it, Greg. See you tomorrow.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Please subscribe to the podcast. If you don't already, please tell your friends about us as well. We'd love to have them listening. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Dateline_DC. Have a terrific Thursday and join us again on Friday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.